This video is a walkthrough for the Spektrum NX series transmitters. I'm going to show you all some tips and tricks along the way, so let's get started. Servo setup. You have travel. This is the maximum travel allowed for the servo. Sub trim is how you can center your servo. If you're trying to get it in a neutral position, you can go into sub trim and center it there. So it's basically a fine-tune adjustment. Reverse is if one of your channels is backwards. Let's say when you do left aileron, it does right aileron, and right aileron, it does left. You could go into ailerons, click the button there, and that's basically going to flip the switch, so now that they should be working properly. Speed, that's so you can speed up or slow down a servo. So let's say that you want to slow down your gear servo because you want a more scale deployment of the landing gears. You can go in there and turn that down. ABS travel. ABS travel allows you to adjust the travel of the servo when you have a mixed setup and it's causing a binding issue. Balance is for when you have multiple servos on the same control surface and they have a binding issue. There's also a feature to set up twin motors. Dual rate and expo. Dual rate and expo is going to be to set up different throws for your plane. So for example, when you go in the owner's manuals, they'll say low rates and high rates. You could have high rates for 100%. You could have low rates for 70%. You can put that on a switch down here at the bottom. Anytime we're setting up a feature and it wants me to assign a switch, we can go in here and click on switch, and when you toggle that switch, it's going to automatically assign it to that switch. So you can go in and you can use a scroll wheel and manually pull it up, but that's the easiest way to do it. So for example, we've got that one on F, or I say, well, I want that one on C. You toggle the C switch, now you see it's changed over to switch C. And down at the bottom shows you in black which position that switch is in. So we have position 0, position 1, position 2. And you can change to different rates. Expo is also on the screen. That's going to soften up the sticks in the center. So it makes it a little bit less sensitive when you're flying. Throttle cut. Throttle cut's going to be used for making sure when you have the plane and you're powering it up or you're carrying your plane to the runway, you want to make sure you always have your throttle cut on. I set this to H, so we did the same thing there. We can go in, toggle the switch, and now it's on H. I never use a delay and I never require the stick to be on low. When I push the throttle cut, I want it to be active no matter where the throttle is. Next is throttle curve. Throttle curve allows you to put a lower percentage in throughout, going from 0 to 100%. You could use that in an airplane that, let's say if you give it too much throttle, it's going to pitch down really quickly. You could lower down the throttle curve so that way even when you go full throttle, it's going to dial it back just a little bit. Analog switch setup. This setup is going to be your percentages as you move the controls. I don't personally change anything in this menu. There might be a time that you do, but that's what the screen's going to be for, is to change the actual analog switches, which is your sticks and the rear sliders. Next is digital switch setup. This allows you to change the function of any switch. Same way, if we toggle a switch, it's going to activate that one up here. So let's do A. You have plus and minus 100%. Now we just changed this in the servo reverse screen, but you can also change it here if you just want to change the switch itself. Another reason why you maybe want to do this is, let's say you have a gyro on one of your switches and it's only a on and off gyro, but you have it on a 3-position switch. You could actually go in here and change the center to either 100% or minus 100%. So that way it makes a 3-position switch essentially a 2-position. So you'd have gyro off, this wouldn't do anything, and then you'd have gyro on. So what you could do is you could change this to 100% as well in position 1. So when you go to position 1, it'll turn the gyro on, and when you keep going to position 0, the gyro will stay on. Flap system. Go in here, click on switch, toggle our switch. Now we have a flap menu. 0, position 1, position 2. This would be no flaps, takeoff flaps, and full flaps. This adjusts your percentage, so the position of your flaps. This is your elevator mix. I'm going to have a video on how to set up your flap system and understanding those values for flap and elevator, but that's going to be in a later video. Mixing. Mixing allows two functions to operate together, such as rudder and elevator and aileron. So when you give it rudder input, it's also going to add aileron and elevator. You can see that you've got a couple that Spektrum has already put in the radio, and then you have a bunch of inhibit options down here so you can actually set up certain things. In one of my future videos, I'm going to show you how to adjust your elevator mix in flight, and we're going to use this screen. So definitely stay tuned for that one. Sequencer is so you can change the sequence of operations. These are set up in inhibit. Some planes have sequencers in them. For example, on some of the jets, they'll lower down the doors and then the landing gears will come down. Then the landing gears will go up, then the doors go up to follow. You can change those orders in this menu if you want to, but most of the time those are set up on the plane, so it's not something that you have to mess with even if the plane has sequence features. Next is range test. Range test you do at 30 meters. So if you don't know 30 meters, you can just get close by doing 30 paces. So you'll walk 30 steps away from your plane, and you want to do this in reduced power mode. These transmitters and receivers can go a very long range, so to make it in a state where it's going to have a frame loss or a hold or just a signal loss, you can't do that at 30 meters if you have full power. So what you do is you hold the I button to go to reduce power. Then you can move your controls, and in the last menu on the main screen you have a flight log. If your receiver has flight log reporting, then what it'll do is show you if you've got any of those issues with your signal. Next is timer. Timer name, timer mode, which is countdown, stopwatch, or inhibit. Flight time, that can be changed on minutes and seconds. The timer will start when we go above 25% with the throttle stick. The way this is set default is for useful throttle time, so when you go above 25% you'll hear a beep and it will start the timer. When you go below 25% it will stop the timer. If you go down to one time and activate, change it to active, then what that does is as soon as you go over 25%, it's a continuous countdown. So it doesn't stop and start like the useful throttle time. Here's our clear menu. We can actually change that to a different switch if we don't want just a button. Here's our different events that can happen throughout the timer. We've got every minute down. That's if it starts at 0 and goes up, it's going to tell you the minute. 1 minute, it's going to notify you when there's 1 minute left in the flight. 30 seconds, it will notify you 30 seconds left in the flight. 20 seconds, notify you on 20 seconds left in the flight. Then you have 10 second to 1 second. It'll count down 10, 9, 8, 7, all the way down to 1. Expiration, it will let you know when the time's expired. And every minute, it will call out the minute left in the flight. So for example, if it starts at 5 minutes, it'll say 4 minutes, 3 minutes, all the way down. There's different alerts that you can turn on for these features. You have tone, where it just does the beep. Vibration, tone and vibe, where it does the tone and the vibration function. Voice, so it'll actually say 1 minute or the corresponding alert. Voice and vibration. Then we have timer start, timer stop, timer reset. That's when we were using our useful throttle. When we go above 25%, it'll start. When we go below 25%, it'll stop, and it has a tone for that. I always turn that off because when I'm in flight, as long as the useful throttle timer is working, there's no really reason for me to have it call out start and stop every time. You'll see some YouTube videos and that's going on in the background, say timer start, timer stop, timer start, timer stop. I just turn that off from the beginning. I leave timer reset on so when I clear it I can see it on the screen and I can hear that I pushed the button. Next is telemetry. This is where you go in and configure your different telemetry. Next is audio events. This allows us to change different features in the radio so that it'll make call outs based upon what we're doing. For example, let's say we want to label this switch to call out the different modes of flaps. We could have it set up to say takeoff flaps, landing flaps, takeoff flaps, normal mode, gear up, gear down. VTX setup is going to be, if you're using a video transmitter, that'll allow you to adjust your power level and your frequency. Function bar, you have a ticker tape and a my list setup. Ticker tape will scroll functions across the bottom. It can scroll up to 10 functions, such as the position of a switch and the telemetry sensor report. The my list will allow you to put a favorites list on the previous menu. Next is the bind menu. There's two ways you can bind a transmitter and receiver. One is to go in the bind menu, go ahead and put your receiver in bind mode, and then just click on yes. The other way is if you have your radio turned off. So we're going to go ahead and turn our radio off. You go to the top of the radio and push in the I, which is also the bind button. Hold the I/bind button. Hold the power button, and you can see it went straight into bind mode. Next is start trainer. This will allow you to pick between instructor and student, so that way you can set up the buddy box system. System setup we've been through before. And the last thing is monitor. You can look at this menu to see that your controls and switches are working properly. Now we've completed our start to finish tutorial. I appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see you on the next one.